And then he loops religion in with myth. He devalued religion, and in the way that he did it, the timing that he did it, he devalued the belief in Jesus Christ. You say, well, he wore a big cross around his neck. He honored Jesus Christ. No, he dishonored Jesus Christ, because Jesus let us know in the Bible that if you honor me, you'll keep my sayings. What's his sayings? How do we know his sayings? That's how important the Bible is. You say, well, there's a lot of Bibles. This is also what Rome did to you. They confused your thinking about, do we really have a Bible? Do we really have a credible accounting of the Word of God? Yes, we do. But Rome crowded the 1611 King James Bible with a bunch of other bogus Bibles. Now, to further explain to you how they devalued, and I say they, meaning that the Roman Federal Empire, and we're going to get into this in a way that you've never seen. Okay, this is Fulton Sheen at the Hour of Power with that idiot Robert Schuller, I believe that was his name. And he's there at the Crystal Cathedral, this drive-in church, and he's giving a message, and he acknowledges that Jesus was God. It's kind of hard for any intelligent person to not acknowledge that Jesus was God. But how they go about doing it, and how that they rob God of his identity, is very peculiar. So what I see from this man is what I actually see. This is the efforts of the devil, because this is the devil's institution. They were desperate. They could not fight God's truth, but they could confuse the world, they could discourage the world, they could wear you down, because when you compare their truth with the truth of the Word of God, it pales in comparison. Now, here he is at the Crystal Cathedral. I believe it was around 1972, and you'll get to hear his take on how I mentioned, I said they have devalued humanity, they have devalued the things of God, and here's proof, more proof.
He took them and he bore them and he suffered them and then conquered them by the resurrection. This was the first humiliation of emptying and self-giving, becoming like the rest of men. And secondly, he had to spend the rest of his life with stupid apostles. Slow to learn, tardy of intellect. We find it hard sometimes to deal with stupid people. Imagine the divine intellect dealing with fishermen, crude, uneducated minds, so that he would have to say the night of the Last Supper with sorrow, Philip, have I been with you all this time, and still you do not understand? Dealing with hecklers, protesters, like Thomas.
The Bible lets us know that he chose fishermen, common men, that had no massive education of any kind. I guess Luke was a doctor, a physician. That didn't make him a philosopher. The ability to deprogram people and reprogram them. So we find out here that you'll find out through Fulton Sheen's entire ministry, you'll see a pattern. You know, when a man gets convicted of a crime, or he comes up, or he's being tried for a crime, they'll check his record. And one of the most damning things for any individual in a court system is his pattern, his record. If he was arrested for being a thief, the first thing they want to look at is there a pattern? Does this man have a pattern for being a thief? Because if they can prove that there's a pattern of this type of behavior, it's very easy to make the case that this man is a thief. He's what he's done. He's done it here, he's done it here, and he's done it here. So I began to look for patterns with Fulton Sheen. And I began to find out that there's patterns that Jesus essentially was cleverly put down, and he was cleverly equated as a religious myth. And why not? Why would the Catholic Church not equate Jesus as a myth, seeing how they don't have a grip on the truth? They can't take and grasp the Bible because it condemns them. This is why that they had to get rid of God's early church. They had to murder people. They had to burn them alive, cut their heads off. And they had governments working in unison with them because they was the world's financier. Like Bloody Mary of England, Scotland, and all these different countries, they depended on their very life's blood monetarily from the Roman Empire, because they were establishing federalism long before we ever heard the word federalism, and I'm going to prove it with this next video. What you're going to see here is living proof from the horse's mouth, from the Catholic Empire spokesman, that Rome was federalizing the world long before Jesus walked the earth. And just because they didn't use the word federal did not mean that they wasn't federalizing the world. If you kill somebody in 63 BC and they didn't call it murder back then, that didn't make it where it's not murder, okay? So we're gonna prove this now. And I want you to pay close attention to this. Those of you that love truth, those of you that don't care about the truth, don't have a heart after God, I'm not interested in trying to argue with you about it. But those of you that do care, here's your hour. Here's the hour that you're going to shine, and nobody is going to be able to argue with what I've said about the federal government and the Roman Catholic Empire after watching this video.
Were rather representatives of species. It was a trial before a great Roman judge whose name was Pontius Pilate. And in order to understand something of this trial, let us just recall a little bit of history. You will recall that Palestine was conquered by the Romans in the year 63 BC. Perhaps we ought to write a date like that down. And that meant that from that time on, the people of Palestine could no longer coin their own money, and they could no longer sentence anyone.
Did you hear that? They could no longer coin their own money. This was 63 BC, 63 years before Jesus stepped foot on the earth in the form of a man.
The people of Palestine could no longer coin their own money, and they could no longer sentence anyone to death.
So he makes reference of two major things that what happened after Rome conquered a country. Britain was conquered several years later, quite a few years later actually, but when Rome conquered these countries, they wasn't just power hungry for no reason. They had an idea. They had an idea behind these wars. They had an idea behind these conquests, that once they conquered this country, whether you call it federal or whatever word you want to use, it doesn't change what was happening. They literally imprisoned this country, put it under eternal bondage to use their money. It's like you become everybody's pawn shop all of a sudden. This is what the idea of Rome was. This was complete security for Rome, that they not only lassoed that country, took all of its dreams, all of its power of ever doing anything beyond a certain perimeter. So he literally tells you here in this video that in 63 BC, that's BC, they conquered Palestine. And here's another thing. Many of the information that I've read, Palestine was not even called Palestine in 63 BC. So that's another way he's trying to trick you into saying something that's not there. The best that I can figure in my studies, it was called Canaan. And that was the land that God gave them. So Palestine, the best that I can see, was not even Palestine in 63 BC when it was conquered by the Roman Empire. It was Canaan. So you see that not only did they conquer Palestine, they conquered Israel. They conquered Britain. They conquered all these countries, these major countries that had any kind of ability to form any kind of an army. And you say, well, he didn't say it was federalism. Well, you call it whatever you want to. This is proof that Rome conquered countries, and what did they do when they conquered them? He told you. They couldn't coin their money anymore. So let's listen to it again for those of you that are thick-headed.
Palestine could no longer coin their own money, and they could no longer sentence anyone to death. The Romans reserved that power for themselves. The Romans reserved that power for themselves. The people of Palestine could no longer coin their own money, and they could no longer sentence anyone to death. The Romans reserved that power for themselves.
All right. So when I found that video, it was like the Holy Grail. Okay. Maybe this video might be a little shorter than I thought it was going to be.
How long did Napoleon reign supreme? 12 years. See, sun myth. He never existed. Furthermore, where is the sun strongest? In the north or the south? It's the south, isn't it? Gets weak in the north, doesn't it? Where was Napoleon defeated? In Russia. Take another. This is so common. There's no point in using names. Names from Germany, France, England, and America. Their argument is that all religions are due to a sun cult. The sun gods explain almost every religion under the sun. Apollo, for example, had a miraculous birth.
What he's not telling you is, yes, there is a connection to the sun god, the sun idea, because when God scattered the people at the Tower of Babel, it's in the Bible, they took a piece of Babylonian culture with them. And that's why you see the fleur-de-lis pop up in different parts of the country.